Bitter Creek sat strangled beneath a sky the color of lead, its crooked buildings half buried in wind-blown snow and silence. No sheriff. No church bell. No law but the kind men made with bullets and fear. It was the kind of place the world had left behind, perfect for the Blackthorn gang. Their horses thundered in just past noon, snorting steam and crusted in frost. 5 of them, draped in black dusters, rifles slung, boots caked in roadkill and sin. Rafe Blackthorn led the pack, a man whose stare could frost glass. Beside him rode Hank Grady, tall and toothless, with a laugh like a broken banjo. Jed carried a scattergun and spoke to it like a friend. Tug and Boone trailed, younger, crueler in a way only the untested could be. They'd lost a mon in the last heist, maybe more if you counted the gold that never made it to their hands. Marshals were too close. The gang needed to vanish. And Bitter Creek, tucked in the snowbound basin with no telegraph line and only one way in, seemed just the place. Except for the trapper. He was already there when the gang rode up, leaning against a hitching post outside the old blacksmith shop, face hidden beneath a thick beaver pelt hood, hands tucked in a wool coat stained with old blood and fresh snow. He didn't move when the outlaws passed. Didn't flinch when Rafe's horse kicked slush inches from his boots. "Who's that?" Boone muttered. "Eli," someone whispered from the porch of the saloon. "Just a trapper. Keeps to himself." Rafe turned to the speaker, a skinny man with shaking hands and a too-wide smile. "Just a trapper, huh? Funny how Marshall showed up a day after we passed this basin last time." Hank's eyes narrowed. "Could be he's the tongue that wagged." "Heard he never talks," said the barkeep from inside. "Well then," Rafe sneered, dismounting, "let's see what his silence says under a rope." The townsfolk melted like snow and fire. Doors shut. Curtains closed. Bitter Creek had seen enough hangings to know when not to interrupt. Rafe stepped close to the trapper. Eli looked up, slowly. Pale blue eyes, calm as a winter lake, stared out from beneath the fur. He didn't blink. Didn't speak. "You got a name?" Rafe asked. "Nothing. You warn the marshals. You sell us for silver." Still nothing. Jed stepped forward, pistol drawn. "Maybe he can't talk." "Oh, he'll scream," said Hank, grinning. "They all do." Tug tossed a rope down from his saddle. The noose swung like a lazy clock pendulum. Boone hesitated, watching the trapper. "Something ain't right, Rafe." Rafe didn't care. Don't need to be right. Just needs to be done. They dragged Eli across the street to the old hanging tree, a twisted pine warped from lightning years before. Snow crunched under boots and hooves. Eli walked without resistance, hands loose at his sides. His rifle, a long scarred sharps, lay against the blacksmith wall untouched. The rope tightened around his neck, rough hemp scratching skin. Boone climbed the tree, looped the end, double-wrapped it. Tug yanked Eli's hands behind him and tied them, but not tight. Like maybe some part of him didn't want to go through with it. "You're awfully calm," Jed muttered. "Ain't natural." Eli's lips curled, just slightly. Not a smile. Something older. Something colder. Rafe mounted his horse, took the slack end of the rope in his gloved hand, and kicked his gelding forward. The line yanked tight. The trapper's feet lifted from the ground. His body jerked once, then fell. The branch cracked. The knot slipped. The rope burned through snow-packed bark and dumped Eli straight onto his knees. A hush fell. He coughed, sucked in air, then rose. Slow, deliberate. The noose still hung around his neck like a reminder. His eyes found each outlaw, one by one. Calm. Icy. Patient. Boone took a step back. Rafe stared in disbelief. "How the hell?" "You should have checked your knot," Eli said, voice dry as gunpowder. "Now I know your faces." It wasn't loud, but it echoed, off walls, across snow, into marrow. Jed raised his gun. Eli didn't move. Boone stopped him. "Don't. He's just one man." Boone looked around. Doors were still closed. Town silent. But the wind had changed. The air felt different. Thicker. Like the calm before the worst kind of storm. Rafe gritted his teeth. "We'll finish it later. Mount up." Hank protested, but Rafe snapped at him. "Ain't worth the noise now. We leave. We rest. Then we deal with him permanent." They turned. Rode off in silence. The noose still swayed on the pine. The rope lay coiled in the snow like a snake that had just missed a strike. Eli stood motionless, frost on his lashes, breath steady. Then he walked to the blacksmith wall, picked up his Sharp's rifle, checked its chamber. Loaded. Behind him, the wind began to howl. Snow swallowed the hoofbeats as the Blackthorn gang vanished into the folds of Bitter Creek's canyon pass. They didn't speak for the first hour. Not even Rafe. The noose had failed. The trapper hadn't screamed. And that stare, unblinking, wordless, followed each of them in silence. Boone glanced over his shoulder for the third time, but the basin behind them was empty. No sign of pursuit. Just wind carving ripples through the white. "You're awfully quiet," Hank grunted, kicking at a clump of snow with his spur. Rafe spat into the cold. He was lucky. Rope slipped. That's all. "Sure," Jed said, tightening the cinch on his saddle. "But them eyes. I don't like a man who don't blink." Tug chuckled, deep and slow. "Ain't nothing behind them eyes. He's a ghost. Leave him be." "Ghosts don't carry Sharp's rifles," Boone muttered. They made camp at dusk, halfway up the canyon, beneath a shelf of stone that shielded them from the wind. The fire crackled low, flames licking at the dark like they were afraid of it. Horses huddled together, steaming in the cold. Jed set a watch. Rafe didn't assign it. Jed just did it, like his gut already knew something was off. Boone couldn't sleep. Every gust of wind sounded like a boot crunching snow. Every creak of the trees like a cocked hammer. He stared at the dying fire, thinking about that voice, low and calm, just after the rope snapped. "Now I know your faces." Tug snored beside him, rifle resting on his chest. Rafe leaned against a tree, hat over his eyes. Hank chewed a strip of jerky with mechanical spite. Then it happened. A crack, not like thunder. Sharper. Crisper. A single shot that didn't echo, didn't waver. Boone sat bolt upright, heart pounding. The fire flared with the wind, then flickered low. Tug slumped sideways without a sound. At first, nobody moved. Then Hank cursed, grabbed for his revolver. Jed spun around, rifle up. "Tug." Boone whispered, crawling toward the body. There was no scream. No gasp. Just stillness. Blood pooled beneath Tug's temple, soaking into the snow. His left eye was gone, just a neat, dark hole where it had been. Boone's hands trembled as he reached down. A spent brass cartridge lay nestled near Tug's boot, half buried in frost. Boone lifted it slowly. .45-70. Sharp's round. Jed circled the camp, scanning the cliffs above with twitchy eyes. "There ain't no way someone got that close without us hearing dot." "No prints," Hank said. "Not a damn track. Nothing." Rafe stood up, staring into the shadows of the canyon wall. His jaw clenched. "He was waiting," Boone whispered. "He's been following dot." "No," Hank said, voice hoarse. "He ain't following. He's hunting dot." They stared into the dark, eyes wide. Snow began to fall, gentle, quiet, erasing everything. "We're heading back," Rafe said finally, brushing past them. "First light." Jed looked at him like he'd gone mad. "Back? After what we just saw?" "We got a job to finish," Rafe snapped. "We don't leave things half done." Boone still held the shell casing. His fingers had gone numb. "He left this for us." Rafe turned. "You think he's sending messages?" "He didn't shoot Tug in the back," Boone said. "He waited. Took the eye. That's a signature." "No man shoots like that," Hank whispered. "Unless he was born with a rifle in his cradle." Dawn came slow, gray and silent. They buried Tug beneath a pile of stones, what little they could dig in the frozen earth, then rode out without a word. No one wanted to admit it, but every glance toward the cliffs was a question they didn't want answered. The trail back to Bitter Creek was colder than before, colder than it had any right to be. The pass narrowed where the rocks rose like jagged teeth, and every corner they rounded, they expected to see him. But they didn't. The basin spread out again, wide and white and quiet. Smoke curled from a few chimneys. But the trapper's cabin near the blacksmith shop was empty. No prints. No fire. The door hung open. Inside, only pelts and a gutted fire pit. His rifle was gone. "He's moved on," Jed said, trying to sound relieved. "He's setting up," Boone muttered. Rafe turned to the others. "We ride in pairs now. Watch each other's backs. This ain't no trapper we're dealing with. He's something else." Hank spat into the snow. "Like what?" Boone looked out over the basin, eyes squinting against the wind. A man who never missed, and now he's got a reason not to. They didn't see the second cartridge until they turned to leave. It sat on the windowsill, catching the pale morning light, as if placed there with purpose. Another .45-70. Clean. Polished. And next to it, carved into the sill with a blade, 5 small notches. One fresh. No one said a word. They just rode. The cabin looked like it hadn't known peace since the first frost of winter. Smoke barely puffed from the chimney, more whisper than signal, but that was enough for Rafe. He kicked his horse forward, the others trailing behind him through knee-deep snow. Hunger gnawed at their bellies, nerves frayed raw from sleep stolen by every snap of branch and scrape of hoof. Boone didn't want to be here. Not in this canyon. Not with one man hunting them like wolves stalk deer. But he said nothing. Words didn't do much against Rafe Blackthorn. Only bullets did, and Boone was short on those. They reached the door just as the last orange light dipped behind the ridge. Rafe pounded it with his gloved fist. Open up. Need shelter. There was a shuffle, a pause, and then the door creaked open. An old trapper stood in the frame, eyes narrow, beard long and yellowed like snow soaked in tobacco. Behind him, the glow of a weak fire lit the walls, where antlers, pelts, and rusted tools hung like trophies of a forgotten age. We ain't got room, the old man muttered. Jed stepped forward, his scattergun raised. You do now. The trapper stepped aside without another word. That's how folks survived out here, by knowing when to bite their tongue and pray the devils passed through quick. Inside, the cabin stank of wood smoke and boiled beans. An iron pot rattled over the fire. A younger man sat on a cot sharpening a skinning knife, his hand pausing as the gang filled the room. Rafe yanked off his gloves. Food. Wood. Ammo if you got it. We're low, the younger man replied. Hank grabbed the pot without asking and slopped a ladleful into his tin cup. Then you'll be lower when we leave. Rafe walked over to the table, where a crumpled war map lay stained with grease and blood. He stared at it absently, then tapped the spot labeled Antietam. You see a trapper pass through here. Quiet fella. Beaver pelt hood. Carries the sharps. The old man didn't answer right away. He reached for a pipe, lit it with slow hands, then exhaled a ghost of smoke. Maybe I did. Maybe I didn't. Rafe slammed his palm down. That ain't an answer. The old man's lips twitched. You boys looking for him, or trying to escape him? Boone froze. Jed lowered his scattergun just a touch. Rafe didn't blink. He ain't just a trapper, the old man said. I seen that rifle before. War issue. 1 in 10,000 men could handle it right. But one, just one, could kill a man blindfolded. Used to be a Union scout. Ghost Eye, they called him. Boone looked up sharply. Ghost Eye Eli, the younger man added. Wasn't a man, far as the tales go. He'd set up half a mile out, take out Confederate snipers through church bell towers, through barn walls. One general said Eli shot a man's buttons off just to warn him. They say he disappeared after Gettysburg, the old man murmured. Laid down his gun. Too many kills. Too many ghosts. Boone's voice cracked. You're saying that's him? He's got the same eyes. The younger man whispered. Pale like river ice. Still. Not dead, but not alive neither. Rafe laughed once, dry and sharp. You believe too many stories. We spooked a backwoods hermit. End of it. Then why is he killing us one by one? Boone said. Rafe turned, fire in his stare. Because we left the job half done. That's all. And we fixed that before more of us end up in the dirt. He grabbed the whiskey bottle from the shelf and took a long pull. Then, without warning, he smashed it against the wall. Mount up. We ride by dawn. They left the cabin before first light. The trappers stayed behind, the door shutting slow behind them. No one waved goodbye. Snow whispered down through the pines, soft as ash. Boone kept his eyes on the ridges above. Every crow seemed louder than it should have been. Every rock formation looked like it held breath, waiting to strike. Hank rode point, mumbling curses and checking his pistol over and over. Jed's scattergun shook ever so slightly in his grip. They crossed a narrow stretch near Widow's Ridge, the kind of place you'd avoid if you had half a mind and a full life. The air changed there, went tighter, like something unseen was pulling at your chest. Then it came. A single shot. Distant. Muffled. Hank jolted sideways off his horse like a puppet with strings cut. Snow exploded where he landed. Boone screamed, but it was too late. Rafe dismounted, rifle drawn, scanning the ridge. Where? Where? Jed stood frozen. Boone ran to Hank, rolled him over. Blood bloomed beneath his left shoulder. Hard shot. 1 round. No second. Boone looked up. A pine branch nearby was snapped at the tip. Resting there, tied with string, was the neck of a shattered whiskey bottle, pierced dead center with a bullet hole. A crude little trap. Like a dare. A signature. Boone stood slowly, heart thundering. Jed whispered, 3 down. 2 left. Rafe spat, rage boiling beneath his silence. Boone turned, face pale. You picked the wrong ghost to hang, boys. Snow swallowed the trail behind them, erasing their past like it was ashamed of what they'd done. Rafe, Boone, and Jed pushed their horses forward through drifts waist-high, wind gnawing at their faces like wolves on bone. The cold had become a living thing, whispering, clawing, reminding them that death was near, and it was patient. 3 left. Out of 5. Tug and Hank buried somewhere beneath the frozen crust, their blood already stiff and forgotten. The silence between them grew thicker than the snow. Every branch that cracked made them flinch. Every gust of wind felt like breath on the back of the neck. Jed hadn't spoken since Hank dropped. His eyes were wrong now, too wide, too white. He muttered at night, sometimes at his gun, sometimes at no one at all. Boone tried not to listen. He tried not to think. But the image of the bullet through the whiskey bottle wouldn't leave his head. That wasn't luck. That was art. Precision. A warning. They lost the first horse that morning. Rafe's gelding stumbled into a hidden gulch and snapped its foreleg. Rafe shot it without a word, then walked ahead, dragging its saddle behind him like a corpse. No one offered to help. By afternoon, Jed stopped riding entirely. He paced beside him in circles, boots crunching unevenly. He whispered something about ghosts again. About eyes that didn't blink. Boone tried to keep some distance between them. The man looked like he was unraveling from the inside out. They camped that night beneath a crooked pine, its limbs bent low with snow, like it was morning. The fire took forever to light. Fingers too numb. Wood too wet. When it finally caught, it threw flickering shadows across their faces. 3 men who no longer looked like men at all, just shapes huddled around desperation. Jed stood across the fire from Boone, swaying slightly. His fingers twitched near the grip of his scattergun. You see him, he rasped. Boone said nothing. I seen him. On the ridge. Just now. Staring. Didn't blink. Never does. Boone looked toward the dark. There was nothing. Just trees and snow and silence. Sleep, Rafe muttered. We ride at first light. Jed laughed, a high, broken thing. There ain't no light anymore, Rafe. He took it. Took Tug. Took Hank. He's taking us, too. Shut up, Rafe growled. Jed snapped. You should have let him hang. Then he ran. No warning. Just turned and bolted into the trees, snow flying in arcs behind him. Boone shouted, lunged forward. But it was too late. A crack split the air, not loud, but final. Jed dropped mid-sprint, his body jerking once before folding into the white. Snowflakes fell softly onto his stillness. Rafe didn't move. Boone stood frozen, breath catching at his throat. No more words. Just the wind. They didn't retrieve the body. By the time the fire settled into embers, Boone sat staring at it like it held answers. Rafe paced behind him, muttering. Boone could feel it coming, the break, the accusation. You talked to him. Rafe hissed suddenly. You two planned this. Boone looked up, eyes hollow. What the hell are you talking about? You knew him. You're soft. Always were. Maybe you helped him. Boone stood. You've lost it. Rafe stepped close, breath hot with madness. Maybe I put the wrong man on that rope. Boone shoved him. Rafe drew his revolver. They stood, firelight dancing between them. And then, a crunch. Not of snow. Of boot. They turned. A figure stood just beyond the firelight. Eli. The beaver pelt hood. The long, battered Sharp's rifle slung across his shoulder. His eyes gleamed like frost under moonlight. Calm. Unhurried. Unkillable. Boone couldn't breathe. Rafe lifted his gun but didn't shoot. Something in Eli's presence held him still, like the mountain itself had risen and taken form. Eli stepped forward. His boots left perfect prints in the snow. He reached into his coat and pulled something small. He tossed it. It landed with a soft ping near the fire. A brass cartridge. Boone crouched, picked it up. 1864 was stamped into its side. A relic. Or a message. Eli's voice came low. Steady. Carved from stone. You got one night. One horse. Ride out. Or I finish it by dawn. Then he turned and walked into the trees. Rafe stared after him, jaw clenched, fists trembling. Boone still held the cartridge, warm from the fire. He gave us a chance, Boone whispered. Rafe's voice cracked. You should have killed me when the Noose had a chance. The sky above Widow's Ridge turned the color of hammered pewter as dusk settled like ash over the land. Cold but sharper here, higher in the canyon, where the trees thinned and the wind never stopped moving. Rafe Blackthorn crouched beside a cluster of rocks, rifle loaded, boots buried in snow up to his calves. He hadn't spoken in hours. Just sat still, watching the shadows stretch across the frozen valley. Boone sat a few paces behind, his back against a gnarled pine. His hands were raw, fingers cracked and stiff. The silence between them was thick, not the kind born of peace, but the silence of men waiting for something they couldn't name, or something they knew too well. Rafe hadn't taken Eli's offer. He hadn't even considered it. He said running was for cowards. Said legends only grew if they fought back. But Boone had already made his decision. He waited until the sky deepened into night, until Rafe's eyes glazed over from fatigue, until the fire he wasn't allowed to light became just a craving behind his ribs. Boone stood slow, quiet, and turned away from the ridge. His mare snorted once, soft as breath, as he took the reins and led her down the trail without a word. He didn't look back. The snow muted his exit. No crunch, no farewell. Just a long shadow fading into trees, swallowed by the dark. Rafe never noticed. He sat in the cold for hours, fingers numb, eyes red, waiting. And then, sometime just before dawn, a whisper. Not a sound. A presence. Like the mountain itself exhaled. A bullet cracked. It didn't strike true. Tore through Rafe's side, sent him sprawling, gun clattering to the snow. He screamed, loud and guttural, firing back blindly into the canyon. One shot, then two, then five, the muzzle flashes lighting his face like flashes of madness. Snowflakes drifted down, soft and indifferent. Blood soaked through his coat, steaming in the cold. Then silence again. Until footsteps. Measured. Slow. Rafe gritted his teeth, pulled himself upright against a rock, revolver trembling in his hand. Eli stepped from the shadows of the trees, like he belonged there. Like he'd never left. His beaver pelt hood was down, revealing that same calm face, drawn tight with time, eyes pale as winter sky. The Sharp's rifle was cradled in his arms, but not aimed. Not yet. He stood 10 paces away, watching. Rafe coughed blood. His voice was a growl. You waited long enough. Eli didn't speak. Rafe lifted the revolver slowly, barrel rising like the sun in a bloodied sky. You gonna finish it or not? Eli exhaled through his nose. Calm. Unmoving. I never miss, he said. Rafe's hand twitched. Eli raised the rifle. But I waited, he added, eyes narrowing, to see if your heart would move first. The Sharps barked once. Rafe dropped his pistol before his knees hit the snow. It ended not with a shout, not with glory, but with the wind shifting east. Boone didn't stop riding until he reached the basin. He didn't speak to the townsfolk. Just tied his mare outside the saloon, walked through the swinging doors, and ordered coffee instead of whiskey. The barkeep asked no questions. Somewhere behind him, a woodpecker knocked against an old post. Boone sipped his drink, gaze hollow, heart heavy. Outside, the snow fell steady. And far above, where the ridgeline curved against the sky, a lone figure walked the trail, rifle slung across his shoulder, coat whipping behind him, fading into legend. Eli. No law had come for him. No reward had been claimed. But still, the story spread, in whispers, in fireside murmurs, in the quiet glances of men who had once thought death only came for the weak. They tried to hang him once, but the noose had only freed what they were never meant to wake. The wind had gone still, the way it does before snowfall, that quiet hush when the world seems to hold its breath. Boone sat alone beside the fire, its embers casting long shadows on the trees, his back aching, his soul worn to pieces. Rafe Blackthorn lay still beside the pine, his revolver inches from his hand, eyes staring up at a sky that didn't care who he'd been. Boone didn't know if the bullet came before the draw or after. Maybe Eli had waited, just like he promised, just long enough to see if Rafe's heart had changed. It hadn't. Boone didn't sleep. Not that night. Not with 3 dead men in the snow and the memory of those pale eyes burning behind every blink. The fire crackled low, then faded, until there was nothing left but the frost and the dark. Boone mounted the last horse just after dawn, saddle stiff, reins crusted with ice. The beast was tired, just like him, but it carried him slow and steady through the ravine, past the place where Hank fell, past the ridgeline where Tug vanished, past the bottle hanging from the tree, now shattered and gone. When Bitter Creek rose from the basin like a crooked dream, Boone felt the weight of silence follow him in. Doors opened. Men stepped onto porches. Nobody smiled. Nobody spoke. He slid from the saddle, boots crunching ice as he stepped toward the saloon. "Where's the rest of 'em?" the bartender asked. Boone removed his hat. "Gone." They stared at him, a kid no longer, face lined with cold and truth. He told them everything. Every shot. Every warning. Every choice they didn't take. The rope. The fire. The cartridge stamped 1864. And the men who emerged from that noose like he'd been born again, not for mercy, but for justice. Some folks crossed themselves. Others simply nodded. One old man at the end of the bar whispered, "Ghost Eye." Boone turned to him. "That his name?" The man nodded. "Used to be a scout. War sniper. Never missed. Said he left the killing behind. Looks like it found him again." Boone stayed in Bitter Creek one more night. Slept in the blacksmith's loft. He didn't drink. Didn't talk. Just stared at the rafters while snow tapped against the tin roof. When morning came, he saddled a new mule and rode south, away from outlaw trails, away from hanging trees, away from men who mistook silence for weakness. He never picked up a gun again. Years later, he'd sometimes dream of that canyon, not of the gunshots or the blood, but of the moment Eli stepped out of the dark with snow on his shoulders and a bullet in his palm, offering a chance. A choice. Mercy from a man who owed none. And sometimes, when the wind blew just right, Boone swore he heard a single shot echo across the plains. Not loud, but certain. It was months before anyone saw him again. A trapper crossing through Bitter Creek in early spring swore he passed a man walking through the trees. Said he looked like he'd been carved from the land itself, skin weathered, rifle slung, steps slow but unyielding. He didn't speak. Just nodded once, like a man who understood the weight of silence. The trapper said he saw him pause at the old hanging tree, the one with the scorched bark and the crooked limb. A hawk cried above, circling wide in the pale blue sky. The noose still hung there, swaying gently in the breeze, untouched since the day it failed. The men looked up at it, then kept walking. No one followed. No one dared. And that's how legends live, not in the noise, but in the quiet steps of a man with ghosts behind his eyes and a rifle that never missed. They tried to hang a quiet trapper, but the noose revealed the deadliest shot alive.